we're good, I think. Now I'm just going to have to monitor a few things because I just booted up my computer, and I have to make sure everything is set up correctly, and I'm watching the chat to see if we have anyone confirming that the stream is live. It might be too early for people to show up and confirm. Might be too early this morning. So, with that concept in my head now, I'll just go ahead and say we'll wait for people to show up later on in the day, later on in the stream. Now, actually, before I get started, there is something I can do to kill a little time, which is, let me show you. As I was working on fonts, I got to a situation where I had 4coder fixed on only loading one font, and the font it loaded, on Windows at least, was this one, as you can see, right? So I've been running it with like 14F, but on stream I don't want it to look like this. I want my old look back. So I've got 4coder working with multiple fonts again, and now with system fonts this time. So I'm gonna upgrade my 4coder real quick. Which will give us a sec to maybe see if I can get a second person to confirm that the stream is working. Alright, so I need you. I probably shouldn't have done that. Oh well. You. You. Oh, whoops, I have to, build the good version, or 4coder will not be able to run my big files. Ooh, I have Twitch chatters. Cruifa, hey, good morning. How is it going? I'm just over here upgrading my 4coder build so that I've got full fonts again. Yep, we're gonna need this and this. You know what, I should probably just run the package script because I also want to get the newest build super stuff, and I don't get that if I just run build optimized, so that's what we'll do. I'm alright. I have a lot more system level programming. I have a lot more operating system programming ahead of me than I like. At some point on a stream, I can't remember if it was you or Captain Craft or someone asked me. Maybe it was Mikkel. Someone asked me, uh-oh, now I've got a real problem because it's not even, maybe I should take a look at this. Oh no, I've really screwed my setup this time. Alright, well hopefully that built hopefully it built the Super X64 version correctly. Okay, it did. So I can get that up and running. But yeah, it was you or Captain Craft or Mick or someone asked me if I was happy to have lots of system programming done, like all the operating system programming basically behind me. And I had this weird sense where I was like, I want to say yes, because it seems like I should be happy about that, but I knew there was something holding me back from being enthusiastic, and now I realize what it was, which is that there's still a lot to do on the operating system layer. So like when I was doing fonts yesterday, it was just like, I implemented the thing once, and then I implemented it 2 more times, just going through this log of like, alright, how do I do it on this operating system? What do I do? But today we get to do purely not platform dependent code, which is good. Oops. I need these 2 fonts. Let me know if you can read that. that's what the stream is going to look like. I do need to do a little bit more on my, now that I'm reinstalling 4coder, I have to do a little bit more hacking on it to get it completely ready to go. Okay, good. Let's see, Kruifa says, I added some IPC calls between 4coder and Humbug this morning and last night. Now when I do a build, it runs in an active Humbug process. When I do a build in an active Humbug process, also working on a stop at breakpoint 1. Yeah, I don't know what IPC is. I feel like I know inter-process communication. Like, is that like remote RPC, but for not over a network? Is that the idea? So that you can launch Humbug as a child process or something from 4coder or vice versa, and then have them talk back and forth. Oh, while you're here, do you want to talk about that API thing we were talking about on your stream sometime last week? You were talking about the new 4coder API and potential integrations with other APIs, and I saw a problem with the way you were imagining it would happen, which is mostly a problem with how I'm imagining the 4coder API would look, and not a problem with what you're saying directly, but it also seems to me likely that lots of people would have done what I would do in 4coder that would make it impossible to do exactly what you were suggesting without a lot of work. Ah, okay. Alright, I need to go here. Build super 4coder experiments.cpp. To code 4coder. There we go. This feels more like my build. Now, actually, I want to, one more time, I want to turn logging on today. I'm not sure if that will be, like, I haven't run 4coder with logging for a while, so I don't know if it's a performance concern or not. But there's a paste bug that shows up super rarely on Windows that I'm trying to catch, and I've put logs all over the post to clipboard. It's not a paste, it's a copy thing. The post to clipboard code. Radlab Gaming, hey, good to see you again. Alright, so before I get to my real goal today, I'm going to take a minute to talk to Kruifa about some API stuff. So, what you were basically considering would happen. I'll give you I'll try to recreate what you were maybe suggesting, and then I'll show you where, first of all, my plans were a little different, and then also where I don't see that it would actually work out quite as nicely as you're expecting, maybe. So, you were thinking it might be something like initialize stuff, right? And then why don't I do this slightly differently? Fake.cpp. Alright, so you're suggesting it might be like initialize stuff, forever loop, pump events 4coder, or this is the for identifier thing, fcoder pump events, and then maybe coder. I'll go with fcoder, and then I can't remember exactly what you were suggesting, but it was maybe something like fcoder. Maybe you have like fcoder events, something roughly like this. Fcoder dispatch events, fcoder, it's something like, or maybe it's like dispatch events using whatever system I want. Perhaps calling 4coder helpers fcoder dispatch to command byte mapping. Maybe something like that. And maybe something, I forget if you included this, but my vision of it would, at very rough terms, be maybe include something like this. So let me know if I'm getting too far away from what you were suggesting. I know you probably can't remember exactly the way you were setting it up there, but something like layout and render, fcoder panel, blah blah blah, however you lay out panels, 0. This is how I kind of imagine it would work. And it's a little bit different than this, but it would be something like this. Fcoder buffer panel 0 buffer ID, like panels 0.buffer ID, maybe something like this. Not sure, maybe. Yeah, a lot of the customization would be right here, so you wouldn't necessarily have this, but I've imagined that as I'm transitioning to having this, I'll keep a library for the same kind of command map behavior around, and you can just say, like, create command map the way I always have in 4coder, even though there's now a way to do it without that, where it's just a switch or something here, and then you can dispatch to it so that your code doesn't have to change too much if you actually didn't need all the flexibility that the new API would get you. And then something like, you were suggesting like, somewhere in here there would be like Vim engine stuff, Vim edit text somehow, whatever, right? This is kind of what you were proposing might be possible, if I understood correctly. Let me know, before I move forward, tell me if I've completely missed the idea somewhere here. Right. So it was, Vim was Jeremiah of Lisa who mentioned the Vim. So you were saying something like fractal, fractal dispatch, whatever. something like this. And that would lead to being able to get a buffer in here that is showing you fractal stuff. Now, here's the thing. I think you might have mentioned Vim or something, because here's the thing. With fractal, it would probably work, what you're suggesting here. But there's a big problem with this, which is that, well, there's two problems. One of them is yours, and one of them is mine. So, the first problem is this call right here. If 4coder is pumping your events, then you're going to bump up into any other engine or library that wants to pump its own style of events. Anytime that it has its own notion of processing events, because a lot of people do a poor job of separating retrieving event data from the operating system from the process of handling some of the details of retrieval. So like 4coder won't do this, where you say pump events and it not only gets the event data that you care about, but also pre-plans what it's going to do with some of it, or stuff like this. And so if you were to for instance have a Vim engine that had a pump events thing too, the two could never work together unless the Vim engine happened to provide a way to do one of the following things: to pump events without doing any processing at all, which might be some of the things will have this, or to pass in events yourself and ask it to treat those as the events, and then you can pump it in a clean way where 4coder promises not to do anything but return data to you, so that its internal state is not affected by the process of pumping events. And that's a problem with the fact that I imagine a lot of engines will, like I said, basically alter their internal state a little bit whenever they pump events. Because of a failure to plan for these things to interoperate. So I don't know, that might not be a problem actually, it's hard to say, but I imagine that would probably come up for at least some things, where you just I can't, the API for this thing requires that it pumps the events, and so somehow you have to make it possible to convert to 4coder events maybe, so you have someone else do the pumping and then you grab their events and convert them to the 4coder events type. That might be possible. Now my problem is that this is actually not at all the way it would look in the upcoming API, because what I don't plan on doing is actually turning 4coder into a library. I've decided that way back when, I've come to the conclusion that way back when it was me and Martin Cohen, who was working on Hail, kind of both starting up our editors, 4coder got more popular, and I put more time into it since then. I think I haven't seen much Hail stuff for a while, but Hail had the right idea in terms of customization, which is that it was a library. It was just a library. I went for more of this it's an engine thing, which means you don't actually, in 4coder's API, even when I upgrade it, you won't actually write main. You'll write main 4coder. And the reason that's important is all of these other things here, they're now on a different thread, basically, right? What's happening here is the 4coder will run the main thread, and it may actually call it, well, it can't, yeah, and it will call this it'll let this run as a separate loop with its own lifetime that it enters and runs separately, so that it loops without having to return and call back into from 4coder. But it's still going to be off the main thread then, and so various APIs may not work anymore if they're dependent on that as well. Now, I could imagine someday being able to finally get 4coder to the point where it's ready to be just a library, but the even now with 4coder being structured as it is, I don't know how I would turn it into a library without the problem of the threads, because a lot of the things that are the way 4coder does them, there's just a number of problems with organizing the way I want certain APIs to work that can't be done without running certain things on separate threads, and that includes the window and OpenGL stuff is actually on a separate thread from this thing. Now, Maybe if it was a library, it would all fall into different spots. But that's also the reason why I'm super hesitant whenever someone says, "Can we call OpenGL stuff?" Because I'd have to find a way for you to put all your OpenGL calls onto a buffer that gets run on the right thread. So that's a couple of problems. I don't know. I don't really have a solution. The reason that it might be I have to ditch the idea of running anything in a coroutine, but that has helped the API tremendously in certain spots. Now, I think I'll probably upgrade. The reason I use coroutines is for query bars like this, so that you can like take input and then do whatever you want with it, so that like incremental search is really easy to implement because it is basically a separate thread that's locked on getting another input from the user, so it can have its own loop with its own lifetime separate from the rest of the main loop. And that means a lot of calls would happen from a different thread. Anyway, now maybe I should just give that up, and when I switch to making the query bars individual buffers, maybe that will be more natural. We'll see. Anyway, I think that is a good primer for that. We'll get to the main meat of the stream now. 10:20 start time. We are working on today finishing, where is my stream to do? Here it is. Finishing this. I'm going to copy this into there. Close that for now. So I want to finish this as much as possible. Maybe not get to the bonuses, but maybe. But this I want to finish today. And we've got maybe 6 hours. Yeah, I'll be overlapping with Handmade Hero at 4 my time, if I can still going then, but that's not a problem for me. I'll watch it on the archive. Now, yeah, so what we need to do is get to the generator. Fiery Drake asks, what approach did you take for implementing coroutines? I did a lot of iterations on that, so I'll go through all of them for you, because I didn't just use one. So one thing you can do is completely avoid using the operating system or C standard library and not actually do any unusual flow control if you restrict your coroutines to only ever yielding from the first call. So like if I make normally with a coroutine you can make a call and then it can make several calls, and then eventually like you make a call to a coroutine and you like launch it, right? And you say, here's the function I want you to run. It can go several calls deep into its call stack and then yield from there, and the whole stack is saved as a separate stack that later you can enter back into the same spot where you left off. But you can make a hack around that gives you basically the same way of thinking about flow control by just making a reentrant function where you keep calling the same function with like a state pointer that is basically the information that would normally be on the stack is instead stored in a state point, like a struct on the previous frame's call stack that you keep calling back into, or it's stored somewhere else so that you can keep returning to that function by passing in the same state pointer. And the only limitation there is you can't yield from anything but the first function. It's I called it a Duff's routine because it's a little bit based on the idea of a Duff's device, as Karifa points out, where the original idea was you would have a counter that would tell you where you yielded from, and then you would have a switch at the beginning of your function that would jump you to the case right after that. The only problem with that is then you can't jump into the middle of certain things you want to jump into the middle of. So the next thing you can do, and so for that I just use gotos instead. At the beginning of the function, it switches on the counter and goes to a label. The second thing you can do is you can go to each operating system and look at what is the way that you want me to do sort of a lightweight separate call stack that doesn't also boot up a thread. And so like on Windows you can create fibers, and on Linux you can create there's some kind of context something, I forget the full name of it right now. But you basically allocate this extra stack and like a register file for it and whatever. And that's your thing that you can use the operating system to call to. Now, in addition to that, I also had a thread pool, and when I started working on Mac, it turned out Mac didn't support context the same way Linux did. It was not exactly the same. It might have been possible to get it to build and work similarly, but it looked like it was going to be a little bit of work, and I was sort of looking for ways to decrease the amount of unshared code between the operating systems. So what I ended up doing was re-implementing all my coroutines as just threads with a sort of a lock and a condition variable. Yeah, make context, swap context, those calls. So I ended up re-implementing them as just separate full-on threads, because I only have a couple. It's not like I have a bunch of them flying around that I'm concerned about the implication of the creation of threads. I create a fixed number of them at launch. It's very small, and that's a hit I was willing to take to create a full extra thread on every operating system so that I didn't have to maintain 3 different implementations, or 2.5 different implementations, or however it was going to work out in Mac. So now they're all separate threads, and it basically semantically works the same way, because you're still like able to lock a thread on and pass a signal to the other thread that it may wake up, and so they are always in complete lockstep like that, where only one is running like their coroutines, but they're actually threads. And as soon as you switch from, like on Windows particularly, but really on every operating system, once you switch from actually using coroutines, or contexts or whatever, fibers, to actually using separate threads, all of the things that require thread continuity do work on the real coroutines that don't work on the locked threads. So, for instance, a bunch of Windows bugs showed up because now calls that were happening technically on the same thread still weren't actually on the same thread anymore, and the Windows API doesn't like that. So I had to reorganize a few things to make that work. But the good news is, it's also true that implementing a coroutine as a locked thread is like way less code on all operating systems than the direct thing that actually implements coroutines. Like the making fibers on Windows, it's so hard to they don't give you enough sort of access to the things you want to easily organize it to pass data around. So there's a lot of kind of hacks and things that you have to work out that are actually not as necessary for just threads that lock. So that's where I settled, because it makes my life easier for maintenance. Although, I don't know, maybe all the bugs it caused in the separate thread stuff actually means it wasn't worth it. But now that also forced me to clean up some stuff that it probably should have been organized that way the whole time. So I think it's a win. Alright, so what we need to do right now is I want to run this. Let me look at my project file real quick to remember what my commands are. So F5 does the whole thing. Alright. Right, so right now I have it printing out the names of aliases, name, right. Okay, so what's the data structure we need here? We're basically creating a list of string pairs, right? Where the string pairs, this is pretty simple stuff. Okay. I'm not going to make a separate header for this because I want it to all fit in one file, but it does beg the question where. It does force me to answer this question of how do I want to organize my structs, and I think the answer. Do I have a long separator somewhere? All right, let me do a quick search for this. Perfect. File dump, you're separate. Error, you're separate. Reader. Peak token, peak position. Error, you're separate. No wait, temp reader's in there too. You're separate. Temp reader. You're there. Okay, so it's just inter-process communication is all it stands for. Gotcha, gotcha. And RPC is where you do the thing where you're like sending a string and then waiting for them to receive it and call a function as if the thing you're calling to is like a dynamically linked module of your own application kind of thing, right? You're like sending to a server, here's my request, and then you lock and wait for them to return an answer. And that's not IPC, that's RPC. Makes sense, makes sense. Alright, so require, all these requires are a thing. Extract, extract, parse documented command. Right, so these are the things that actually get some of the major work done. So I think this is where I want to introduce, whoops, this. So we basically have command or yeah, name doc documented command. I'm also going to have an alias command string target, and that raises the question, why don't we just have a meta command entry, and then we can call this like name, and we'll make a union where we can have either a doc or a target, and meta commands type. By the way, there's a new bug in the Mac version. Somehow I messed up caps lock. Gotta fix that today. The only IPC I ever do, the only inter-process communication I ever do, in anything I've made so far is with 4coder doing the basically direct pipe reading and printing. That's as fancy as I've ever done anything. But for the most part, I haven't needed to do anything fancy, so that's why I don't really have any knowledge of the terms that tend to be used. Am I okay with it being that long? Yeah, the month of 4coder is more than halfway done, actually. We were halfway done a couple days ago, but it's been a pretty good month. You gotta keep in mind the first full week and 3 days went to just getting Mac stuff completed. Completely completed. Because the first time I got it completed, I was not completely completed, I was only partially completed. By the way, hey Mickle. Meta command entry arrays. Yeah, I wouldn't really need a type in here, at least not yet that I know of. So these right here are my array of doc strings, and this right here is my array of aliases. Uh-oh. One sec. I have to do just something completely, random and off-screen. Okay. Yep, we're good. Nothing to worry about. Back on track. Docstring count. Alias count. Now I realize I probably don't want to force these into being arrays, so one thing I actually do need is this. And then first docstring, last docstring, first alias, last alias. Well, yeah, I totally know how to spell aliases. I was not checking that. No way. Now, do I have double linked list stuff? The answer is I don't. Define SSL push first last node if first equals 0 and last equals 0. Well, if first equals, yeah, let's do it that way. Well, let's do it this way. This should be correct. Then, first equals last equals node, else last next equals node, last equals node, and either way node next equals 0. Hey Jim 0. I'll just go with Jim. How's it going? About the Raspberry Pi thing, let's see, it's Doubter is asking, will there be a Raspberry Pi port or a terminal version in the foreseeable future? I don't know if it'll happen this month. It'll probably happen in my next month of 4coder, which will be maybe February or March. Not sure. A terminal version of 4coder, I don't know. That's still going to happen someday, but that is so different. It's just not, it's a little daunting, the amount that has to change to make that possible. I'd have to, it wouldn't just be a simple matter of like swapping out the operating system layer with a different version of the operating system layer. It's a whole thing, because I would need to get the right, I'd probably use like N curses and curses and all that to do the operating system abstraction on the terminal itself. But that means, is it a different renderer? Well, kind of, but what else has to change? You have to change the way you get input, I believe. You have to change like everything. It's a completely different operating system layer on every operating system. So it'd take my number of operating system layers from 3 to 6. So I have to wait for that. I'm not ready. On Raspberry Pi, it'll probably happen pretty soon. It'll be like the next thing I do, is just get the Linux version to work on Raspberry Pi. Okay, so what we want to do next is I have a way to push these things on now. I feel like life might be easier for me if I did that. It's too much. We're not at the point where that makes sense. So what I want to do is I'm going to pop open generator over here. No, not that. Give me this generator. Okay, there we go. And come up here and look at my structs. So I want a meta command entry new entry equals push an array on, I've got an arena here, right? Oh, it's a partition in 4coder, that's right. I've got a partition. I want one meta command entry. And then I'm going to take my new entry and I'm going to set the name equal to this name here. And I'm going to set the doc to this doc here. And then I'm going to SSL push onto the, okay, so I don't have the arrays right now, but it's going to be the arrays first doc string arrays last doc string new entry. Now a couple points just so everyone, you know, is not too concerned about this. Yeah, so first of all, the way the strings work is these strings I've read are not stored locally. What's happened is I have a big text file that I've loaded into memory, and these strings here are all they contain is a pointer and a size. And so these particular instances of my string struct can be used in two different ways. Either they kind of have personal memory in which they are mutable strings that they can add and move things around and whatever, or they're immutable strings, which means in my head they're immutable, but the thing they're pointing to is some big text source, and they are just a pointer and a size. And that's what I'm using them for here. So this is basically me just setting a pointer and a size that I've already got bundled together in here, and the memory is somewhere else, so that is fine. And it's somewhere else on the heap that will survive. Then the SSL push here, I just implemented that, but I need the arrays for that to work. So let me come up here and say, well, should the reader get that? I don't think the reader should get that, because I might want to reuse the reader for something other than generating this. And it's not too much hassle to pass down the command entry arrays. So there we go. Now on the next one, I'm going to basically do the same thing. Push a new entry. It gets a name, and this time in target, which is called a potential here. Perhaps I should call it a potential everywhere, so one sec. Doop, ba-doop. And now this does not get pushed on the doc strings, this gets pushed on the alias. And then there's one other thing. I need to increment the arrays doc string count and the alias doc string count. Now, a minute ago, I was stopping and I considered, hey, look, I've got this twice, and I'm going to be doing this thing twice. Why don't I pull that out and, you know, abstract that out as a separate little like list thing? But sometimes it's that like the amount of time it would take to have done that would have actually been much longer than the amount of time it took to do this. And is it that big a deal? It's really not. If it became a thing where I had like 3 or 4 copies of this, or if I start editing the way I insert a lot, I might add that abstraction before that. I'd start doing that, but right now I'm okay with the duplication because I don't foresee any of that happening. And only if my plans change will I want to add that abstraction. Okay, what's our next move? Well, first of all, let me make sure this has its arrays. Meta command entry arrays, the arrays. And now, when I fail to build, it'll be because I'm not passing those arrays pointers in. Of course, I ran the wrong build script. Ooh, what else is going wrong? Type def. Oh, I don't have those. Okay, uint32. Nope, not that build script. Here we go. Name position, potential position, you guys are out. Parse documented command. Now these are the ones that actually need the arrays to exist. So I'm going to put meta command entry arrays. Here are my arrays, and then we put an arrays pointer here and an arrays pointer here. Now whoops, still running the wrong build script. Okay, so now I'm building that data structure. There's a couple of problems. So I want to, let's see, I already made sure that I don't have any things coming in here without a doc string. That doesn't necessarily mean that I don't have, that I definitely don't have any duplicates coming in, and I only need to check duplicates here and not on the other ones. So I'm going to add a quick bit of work here to do has duplicate entry. First, last, name. Now this might be pretty slow because I'm looping over, it's an n squared loop. If you don't like it, make your own editor. I've got to keep this project moving along. So entry equals entry next, and if the generator for build super becomes the super slow thing that's just crippling me, then I'll stop iterating the linked list every time I add somebody new. But in the meantime, this will do. Is duplicate or has duplicate equals false if there's a match between my name and the entry's name. Then has duplicate is true. Return has duplicate. Okay, so if has duplicate entry first doc string name, we can run this test before we even, well, let's wait till we get the doc string. Then what we'll do is we'll say, okay, the error then will return false before we do anything else. But the error we want to put out, and what does my error function look like? Anyone remember? There we go. I pass in the reader pointer. I pass in the position, which I'm going to say is right here. Read or peak position on the reader. And then we can do, there's my position, and my message is 2 commands, warning, 2 commands with the same name and separate doc strings. I need to just check some other unrelated thing real quick. Don't worry, it doesn't affect the stream in any way. Alright, we're done. It's good. The situation is resolved. OX43 asks bool 32 question mark. Yeah, I just default to making my bools 32 bits long. If I'm going to go in and care about like data usage bandwidth, I'm probably going to use flags. Two commands. So point is, if I'm gonna not think about it, I use bool 32, and that has a couple of advantages. One, it's like the size of a register, so there's never like weird like you're loading from things. You never have like weird alignment issues, and so it is sort of bug free. There's never anything weird about bool 32 in terms of behavior. And then if you find that you needed to think about the bit packing and you didn't, if you use bools that are 8 bits long, the problem is 4 times less obvious than if you use bool 32. So if you're not going to think about it, you might as well make it really bad so that it forces you to see it more soon when it becomes important, is my thinking on it. And then when it comes time to think about it, you would push it all the way down to a bit flag. So bool only hides the problem if you're trying to think about saving your bits. In my opinion, anyway. 2 commands with the same, or bool 8 that is. Bool is a separate thing, since bool is like really weird. But bool 8 would be hiding the problem, is my opinion. Now, two commands with the same name and separate doc strings, skipping this one. Multiple commands with the same name and separate doc strings, skipping this one. Alright, so now we won't get duplicate doc strings, and we'll get a warning when that is happening. Aliases are allowed to be duplicated, that's a part of the point. And is there anything else to do? We've got the data structure. I guess the next thing to do is to we have a linked list of all these things. I'm gonna start. I think I can generate now the list of command doc strings. The aliases are a little bit more complicated because we need to like do simple resolution on the various aliases with the same name but different targets. But we can do that second. So yeah, we are now here. We've so this is the okay, what's happening here, and this is parsing one text. So I've actually made a mistake. I don't know if you guys know that I made a mistake, but I did. I don't want one array for each file. I want one array for the whole thing. So this is my partition. Here are my arrays. Let's fix that up first. Arrays. Arrays. And I'm going to rename that because apparently I also have a thing called the array, which is the token array. This is going to become the entry arrays. There we go. So now I have this parse text takes in the partition where it can get memory from, the structure it's going to fill, and then the source name of the text that it's drawing from, and the actual text. The source name is for reporting errors only, and the text is the actual thing it's looking at. Then it parses the text into this thing called array. It creates a reader that's going to read across those tokens, and that stores away the source name and the text for reporting errors and for retrieving lexemes from the tokens. And then we start getting tokens when we find things that appear to look like things we care about, like a custom doc or a custom alias. We find the correct starting position and we parse them, and we're dropping them into that array we created up here, or the arrays that were passed into us, rather. And then, where is that getting called? That's right here on the parse file. Is the only place where it's getting called. So it will also need the arrays, because on every individual file that gets called, which calls the text one. And then where does parse file get called? That gets called on parse files in directory. Now parse files in directory gets called on each subdirectory if we're recursing, or on each of the passed in directories whether or not we're recursing. So those are also going to have to pass the same arrays structure all the way through, and that should be entry arrays. So let's see. I need that there, and I need that there and there, and then parse files in directory gets called again down here, and this is where I actually have to store my entry arrays, the original. Okay, so I've got the original, the one single entry arrays for the whole program now. It goes into the parse files in directory, which might recursively call itself, continuing to fill that same thing with linked list nodes of commands. Later, Coetha. Alright, so what are we doing next? I've got the arrays. I want to start generating data. So, code, rather. So, I'm going to go to my struct, entry arrays, and we're going to do a loop over the meta command entries. Entry equals entry arrays dot first docstring, entry equals entry next. Nope. Entry does not equal 0. Entry equals entry next. There we go. Yep, I got it right there. Okay. So now I'm going over all my doc strings, and what am I doing? I'm just going to print all of it out for now to double check that I've done everything correctly. Entry name .stir, entry name doc.stir, and you know what might be helpful? I always think about adding this to the system, and we can put this way up here at the top where I first include the string header. Let's just add in a string to LC S to LC stir to LC, which will go like so. L dot size L dot stir, and I'll also make an stir to CL, which just flips those. I think that's the way I should start doing this. So then I can do stir to LC whenever I want to call one of these, and that will let me do entry name, whoops, and entry doc, and then I can tell it to get the length of the string out of the ints there that I've just given it. And let's see how it feels about that. L, undeclared identifier. You're right, I said L because I was not thinking. It should be S. And there we go. Now I'm getting the name of a command and its string, the name of the command and its string. So we're printing that out. Let's just change that to printing out to a code file now. I think I want to add a new folder real quick. So I have like 4coder API, 4coder helper, 4coder lib, and 4CPP. These all get, and languages, these all get, languages and themes, these all get exported when I package the super version. And people who get their own super builds now will also be getting the generator, which means they'll need a place for the generated code to go. I generally like to put the generated code in a separate folder just so that there's no possible way that the generated code is replacing ungenerated code when you run it. And so that you can find like all of in one folder. This is a new aesthetic that I've developed, so not all of 4coder abides by this yet. But I could start making that happen. So I'm going to put a generated folder in here somewhere. The question is, I have a couple like, let's see, key codes is already generated, style is already generated, app functions is already generated, so 3 of the API, 4coder API headers are in the 4coder API folder. So this will be a reorganization. I think I'm going to make a separate folder at the same level as 4coder API called 4coder generated. And we're going to move all of that stuff in there. So this is going to be a slight diversion, key code style, because I have to go and change the generator to change output to a new location, and I have to go and change the generated. Yep, that's fine. API. Alright, so they're now going to output there, which means that they should not be able to build because it can't find it. Right, good. Now that means that we need to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about that? I think we just need to go 4coder generated slash there, there, and there. And there? What is this? Okay. Oh, I'm not getting the errors on the other operating systems because I'm not building for other operating. I was sitting here confused, like, why is Windows special? But it's because I don't get errors for all my operating systems. Okay, so what I should probably do is real quick, so I don't forget, open this up here, and yep, these also have those, so doop, doop. Doop, doop. Okay, so now we can get back to the main plan, which is generator here, more generator here, and I'm going to set some defines up top here, like I did in my other file. This will be like meta command data command metadata out. It'll go to 4coder generated slash command metadata.h. Now I wonder if I should be spelling metadata as one word or as two. I guess I'll never know, but in the meantime I'm going to check something else. Is metadata one word? It's one word, okay. And that's how I spelled it there, so we're good. We're good. I must have figured that out once already. Alright, so that's going to be the output file. 4coder generated slash command metadata. And so when I come down here, I'm going to do fopen u write binary, and instead of fprinting to standard out, we're going to fprint out, and instead of this exact thing, we'll do something a little different. In particular, we'll do let's see, there's a couple cool things we can do. So the first thing we're probably going to want to do is print out some setup stuff here. So we need a struct that will take, what should this be called? This is a command metadata structure, and it will take, or not take, but it will contain name, len, description len, now I guess I'll probably want to do this actually, because you might think you could just cram this all on one output line, and that's fine, but someday I'll want to read this code. And so I might as well think about that version of me. Alright, so we create a struct at the top that we are going to use, and then we're going to begin a second one. Yeah, I could keep pushing it on here, but it just feels natural to me. So I always, whenever it feels natural, I just start a separate print, whatever. It is what it is. By the way, we're going to want to do if out does not equal 0, else fprintf standard out, fatal error, could not open output file, command metadata out. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make a static command metadata structure, or command metadata array. So this is going to be command metadata equals new line, and that one we need a %d for. That is the entry array's first or doc string count. And then at the end of this, we're going to fprintf to the outstream that to close the array. And then in the middle, what we can print is we print a single line that will look like this. First, we need a string, and that'll be this right here. Then we'll want its length, so that'll be this right here. And then we'll want another string and another length, which will just be this, doing the same exact thing. So there we go. Now the only thing I just realized is that when I'm setting the entry docs, I don't take the quotes out first. So what I actually want to do is I want to say doc equals substring on the doc. And let me pull up my own documentation on the string library real quick so that I can remember the parameter order here. Subster. Start size. So I want start at 1 and doc.size -2. And then that should be good. That should do it. Well, this is actually not going to work. We're going to have to do something fancier. And the reason we have to do something fancier is that my string might contain backslashes that need to be escaped properly, because if I just print out a single backslash where there's a backslash character, for instance, well, the strings will already be escaped properly, and in the original, and I'm not actually trying to get the string's value. I have an escaped string is what I have. The doc string is a pre-escaped string, so I can actually write that out into the string just fine. The only thing I have to do is remove the quotes. Okay, I was wrong. So we can do that. I just don't actually like it now that I'm looking at it, because it might have well, here's what we're going to do. If doc.size is less than 1, or doc.stir0 does not equal an open quote, then we're going to put an error. Let me get a peek on that. This right here, pose. This is the start pose. This right here is the doc pose peak position on the reader. Then I want to put out an error right here that just says warning doc strings with, what's that called when it's got a like prefix, it's not a modifier, like the R for raw string and the L for long string. What are those things called? I'm going to call it a must not with string literal prefixes not allowed. That should be enough to get the idea across. And I don't need to include a new line in my error messages, actually, I don't think. No, okay. ABDCW, hello, how's it going? Alright, so next up, that should be good now, because I'm not allowing those prefixes. And then and then it's going to create that whole array. And you know what? At the end of each of these, it needs a comma. And besides that, I think this one is ready to go. Okay, I ran F1, which is fine. It just supposed to run F5. F I do that a lot. Hey, do I have the new generated file, command metadata? Hey, check a look at this. Will ya check a look at this? This is pretty neat. Yep. So now I've got length, I have null terminated and length versions of each of these strings, so they can be checked however you want to check them, passed around however you want to pass them around. The only thing I don't have is so now I can just provide this list programmatically in the system, which would be great. Instabot, nope, no spoilers, unless you think learning your editor is supposed to be a puzzle. There's no spoilers. Oh no, I'm scrolling too fast for the compression on Twitch. I'll move slower. But yeah, all the doc strings look like they're here. I mean, I don't have a way to test that they're all here, except that I guess it would. I did add up how many there were last time. Let me go to the top. 172. That looks like the right number. That's what I was expecting, I think. Yeah, I think we've got them all. And now the only problem is if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the programmer, who's writing their own custom layer, and they want for some reason to get to the metadata for a particular command, and they know in their code which command they want. What do they do? Because this is great if you want to be able to say, hey, I want to know, like, give me a list of the commands and their descriptions, or like I have a string that names a command, look it up for me. But if you know the command you want and you know it not as a string in runtime but as compile time information, you don't really want to have to pass a string into a lookup function that returns to you after iterating over this. Like, you know the thing you want now, why can't you link to it right now? That's my attitude towards it anyway. So what we actually want to do is provide a thing that gives us the index for every command where it shows up in this table. And that's not too hard. We just do this loop a second time. And every time through this loop, we're getting an entry. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to make a static int32 called the how do I want to do this? What should I call it? Oop, I have to put quotes on it. That's true, that's true. I think I want this. And then that name is already used for the actual command. So I want some kind of standard postfix, or prefix maybe, like ID. Right, so if you want the ID for a particular command, you take your name of your command and you put it after ID underscore. So now programmatically you have a list of, wait, there's one other thing I need. I need to put the %d in there that sets that thing's value. Okay, run this again, generate, 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 reload this. And now, after our array, we have all these IDs that gives us a jump straight to the position we want so that I can link right to the metadata entry for any command at link time if I want. Sweet. Okay. Now, another thing is, I might, in order to avoid name conflicts, I might want to be like more aggressive about that. So I'm going to go like this actually. Like, I'm going to just go crazy. And then what we'll do is after all that, or before all of that, we're going to printf a helper that actually does the getting of that for you. And that's just a useful way to make it feels better to pass the name of your actual command to a thing that looks like a function and get something back than it does to prefix some arbitrary string on there, especially when that string has to be weirdly long in order to just prevent name conflicts or something like so we're going to call this command metadata. You provide the name of your command. We'll go name, or I'll go command, and then it will return to you by going fcoder metacommand ID. This will be command ID. Metacommand ID at C, and then we'll do a second one, which is metadata, and that will just return to you. Whoops. Yeah. So you actually need a close parenthesis, and that will return to you from our struct here. Okay, I want to command metadata Yeah. So I want to make this fcoder meta command table, maybe. Fcoder meta command table, and try to get the same ID, like so. And then finally we might want to get command metadata by ID, and that'll be an ID and ID. Probably want the address to that, or the address to that. No, Dad, I totally like putting those preprocessor macros in, even though I'm meta-generating it, so it feels a bit odd, like, wait, we're meta-generating so that we don't have the need to wrap these things this other way, but I still like it, because it feels like maybe you said that before I went on about it, but I totally agree. I hadn't read what you said yet, but I totally agree. It feels better to pass the actual name of your thing to a macro, and it's also better because you can use wildly complex names that way that avoid conflicts better. So now we just have these macros here. I'm going to actually pop these macros all the way to the top, so that if anyone pops this file open, the first thing they see is totally callable stuff. So now you've got these different macros. They just take in the name of a command and either give you its ID, its metadata, or they take in its ID and give you its metadata, depending on whatever you need to do. And then let's see, anything else that I can do with the commands directly. I've got the order of them so you can get their IDs, and I got the table of them so you can get their descriptions and their string-based, their like sort of string names, their names as a string. You know, I could, if I wanted to go a little wild here, I could also store the file that they came from. And their line position. I feel like that's going to have a lot of advantages if I go that route. So let's do that while we're here. Command entry. Let's fix those build errors first. Docstring to alias. I'm having slowness problem. It might just be OBS. Okay. I'll keep task manager visible here. Doubter asks, what could file line info be used for? Well, remember that a lot of the users write their own custom code. They might be looking through like the built-in commands or something, or they might be have like imported several other people's code into their own customization, and they're looking at a command and going, "Oh, I didn't know that existed. Where is the code for that?" So that I can go read it. And this would just be a way to like pull it up immediately. Without, because the other what you would have to do if you didn't do this is you would just have to open all of the 4coder custom code and manually search for it, but this will just make it one step faster. Okay, now we can add in file name or source. Yeah, we'll just do file name and you know, I don't see any reason why both of these couldn't have this file name and line number. And I've also like sanitized it, so when I'm building this myself, I don't care that the directories that I'm building from will get built in for users who are like not super users who aren't building it themselves, because, or for super users who just don't build their own custom commands at all. I don't care, because I've gone and made sure I've sanitized all the directories, so they're like at really short, reasonable spots that aren't very personal. The only one I couldn't completely wipe out is on Linux. There is an Allen on Linux and Mac. There's an Allen in the path, which maybe I could do better than that. But you know, whatever. So, how do we want to do that? And I'm thinking this will actually want to be like this: source name, line number. There we go. Then I can do, where do I set the names of these things? Whenever I do that, I'll also set their source name to the reader's source name. The reader has a source name, right? Yep. And those source names are allocated on the heap, so that should be fine. Line number, I'm going to have to revisit that in a minute, because I don't actually have that yet. But we can fix that pretty easily, because I've already got something that basically does that in error. So instead of just 1, what these should actually do is be like line number, and then I'll pass in the reader and the start position, and we'll get now there's technically a bug here now, because I've just remembered that that's not quite right. So what I really want to do is, whenever I do this required thing, I want to be able to get the start positions out of that. So I'm gonna just do that and force myself to implement it. You know what, one thing at a time. I'll do that once I have the other thing up and running. Peak position reader hack. Need to actually make sure we're not getting comments or junk tokens before the command. Okay. Alright, Curlyfa, I'll, you know, next time we get a chance to chat about it, I'll, be interested to hear what your new thought is. You can also email to me anytime. That's always cool. Okay, so, line number. Uh-oh, here it is, here it is. We found it. Okay, I just lost a lot of work, but now I've got a log. So let's go take a look. New topic. Why did I just crash? Wait. Subtopic. Fix my fonts thing so that it can load through this thing. The font stuff's not quite done. Jim, I think so. I think that was the paste bug, and I this morning installed a new build of 4coder set up to log the crap out of the not paste, copy. It's a copy bug. I set it up to log the crap out of my post to clipboard stuff. So I think we've got the info we need now to fix it. What happened? Finish clipboard post. Wow. That is weird. That is not what I expected to find. Beginning clipboard post. Copying to post. Clipboard finish clipboard post. It did not fail in the middle of a clipboard post process. I'm looking in the wrong place, so I haven't solved it yet. But I'll look at this more later. We have a clue now, but yeah, I'm narrowing in on it. The problem, Croifa, is I've tried, and there's something about this particular crash that Visual Studio refuses to look at. I've tried to attach a debugger to it several times now, and it just says unable to find. Well, one of the problems is I can't reproduce this in a debug build, partly because the amount of time you have to spend using 4coder before it happens is large enough that you can't really take the debug slowness that long. Like, you can't just open it up in a debug build and reproduce it, at least not yet, because I haven't found a way to do it without spending a long time working first. And the debug build on like large enough files can be kind of sluggish, so it's just not very easy to recreate that way. Trying to attach without debug symbols seems to just be useless, because by the time it knows something's gone wrong, it's completely lost like all sense of where anything was, and it just says Visual Studio can't attach to this process because of catastrophic failure, and that's all I get out of it. Now, it might be that I'm not doing it right, because I know Jim was able to get more information than me. But I don't know if it's like Visual Studio versions, operating system versions, some kind of difference there that makes it so that I haven't actually been able to determine the line of code where this is happening, which is why I'm using logging. The other thing is, I'm not convinced that this actually was a crash in the middle of a clipboard post, because of the fact that we can see the whole thing. I'm going to take a quick second to go look at that code. While it's fresh in my mind what I was just doing. Yeah, what I should probably do is make a version that builds debug symbols with optimization that'll get me a little closer to see what's going on, but post clipboard. So it got through all of this without crashing. Which means it got through that without crashing. Why is this even a thing? Yeah, I feel like this doesn't even need to exist. And then if I pull up the API implementation, post to, yeah, post clipboard. Yeah, it was definitely here where it called post clipboard that would have led to the crash. Wild. I don't know what that means. Maybe I didn't actually trigger the same bug this time. I'm going to operate under the assumption that I didn't trigger the same bug for now, because I can't remember clearly enough if it was during a copy that it actually failed. I can't remember very clearly. And I don't have timestamps on there to confirm, like, that it was the frame it felt like it was. Yeah, we're going to do that. And I'm going to keep running with the log turned on because I'm not convinced. Okay. Yeah, a lot changed in 22 and 23. In 22, the copy problem, there was a copy problem, and in 23, I fixed the copy problem, but something else is still wrong with it that's leading to the crash. I know that it has something to do with that, I just don't know what it is yet. Now, the problem in 22 wasn't a crash, the problem was that it was no longer, like when you copied on 22, it would go really slow for about 5 seconds and then keep going, and it was on all Windows versions. And what basically it came down to is one of the things as things shook out, I fixed the slow copy bug by buffering the post until the end of the frame, and there's no point in posting multiple times in one frame anyway to the actual clipboard because no other application would get its notifications fast enough to get them both. I don't believe. Or very rarely, and you wouldn't be able to count on it. So there's no point in posting more than once per frame. So I said, whatever the last thing you post is, I buffer that, and then at the end of the frame, I will post it. And that actually fixes the problem because at the end of the frame, there's no, sometimes it got there by a different thread or different coroutine kind of nonsense. It always works, and it's always fast. But for some reason, there's something about the memory management or something that just goes really bad. And it might be that it's trying to, like, do like a virtual alloc actually, or a virtual free that it shouldn't be trying to do, because that code does have a code path that could lead to that, and I haven't ruled out that possibility. But unfortunately, the log I just got did not confirm it for me. But I also am not 100% sure. On the other times that crash has happened, I was 100% sure that it happened on a copy when I was trying to copy something, and that time I wasn't convinced. I feel like I was doing something else when it crashed, but I can't be sure. Alright, so where did I leave off? I'm on the wrong generator. And yeah, that does mean I lost the to-do list completely, which is sad. But that's fine, we're going to complete it today anyway. Clipboard ID. Where do you see clipboard ID? Is that in here? Ah, that's yeah. So clipboard ID is this parameter is set up to prepare for future features. It should always be 0 for now. Clipboard ID is just clipboard ID is just the thing that would allow me to support multiple clipboard channels on operating systems like Linux, where that's a thing, if I ever wanted to. Without having to change the API. Alright, so what's the situation? I need to figure out where I left off here. What are we able to generate so far in this new post-crash world? Okay, so all that is still there. I was probably just getting started on file, yeah, so we need source name, we need line number. At least this time I've already figured out what I need to do, so I can do it even faster. Line, column, coordinates. Save. Okay. Yeah, fancy stuff like autosaving and crash recovery is totally going to be a thing I do when I'm not doing alpha stuff. Like, don't keep in mind, I'm still calling this alpha because I'm not trying to even go that far yet. I've almost got to the point where I figured out everything I want 4coder to be, but and it's been a super long alpha. Like, it's super usable at this stage because I've done enough work because people wanted to start using it that I've got it usable. But it's not meant to be usable. It just I've been forced into making it usable because people want it. Someday though it'll have crash recovery in there and you won't even hit save ever. You won't know that it's gotta be saved. Your files will just be magically there. Okay. But the eliminating save is actually pretty tricky if you want to do it in a way that's not dumb. So line coordinates. Yes, we need to go down to parse. Yep, okay, so we already have all that in there, which is good. Ah, darn. Well, it is what it is now. Okay, so now we have source name, save file, we have line numbers. Ah, that's right. I felt like I was forgetting something important. Alright, so now what I wanted to do was stop doing this and add in an optional thing here that returns to me the start of the good token if the require succeeds. And I want that there. I want that there. And I want that there we go. There. And okay. So now let me pop over here. I feel like doing this in the other panel for some reason. You just gotta do it in the panel that feels right to you. Seed adjustment. Put this out. Call this optional position out. And the way this will work is if we find the one we want, if this does not equal 0, then it's right there. We set that token start. And that'll be on all of these. Very good. Then we just need to grab a little bit of this. There we go. Now we won't see any difference in the output yet, so let's go and add that up here. So I'm currently giving name, name length, description, description length. I want to add in source name, 32T source name length. Again, that's weird. I have to think about why that the cursor doesn't line up the way I expect there, I guess. Line number. And so we can add that in here, not too difficultly, with only minor difficulty, with only minor effort. So we have now another string of this nature? No, a string of this nature this time. Then that and that. Okay, and that comes from entry source name source name len entry line number. this will be good enough. And if it's not, we could just get these at the head end of the process. Then we only have to do it once per file name, per file, and pass the lengths through. Cool, cool, cool. So let's try this out. Auto indent, line 608. And there's a custom command. Alright, that's the auto tab whole file. Yes, it is. It auto indents the entire current buffer. Alright. STC underscore asks, I can't jump to error on Windows demo version. Was I supposed to do something other than pressing enter on the error message? So there's a couple options. Yeah. Let me give you. Let's pull up an example here by introducing a compilation error. I'm going to forget my semicolon, and then we'll build. So there's a couple ways I can go there to that error. One is the command's Alt-N goes to the next command. There's also Alt-Shift-M goes to the first command, or the first error. You can also click on it and press enter, and that should all work. But there's a catch, and this is I don't know if this is your problem or not. You might have hit a legitimate bug, and you could send me the output of your compilation, like the first line, the first error line in your file that doesn't work, and I might be able to confirm that there's just a parsing bug in the error parser or something. But by looking at that, but something that gets a lot of people is 4coder doesn't necessarily have a way of figuring out what relative path is the base from which your compilation happened. It can't. There's like some heuristic ways it could guess, but it doesn't know for sure where the root directory of your build is. So yeah, you have to put a full path here, and that's the thing that almost everyone who is trying to get 4coder up and running misses, just because it's something a bit odd. It's a bit of a deficiency in the system. If 4coder controlled the build process a little more, it wouldn't need to do that. But yeah, you need full paths. Now, if you're using Windows, then what you can do is there's a flag you can add whenever you build. No, not here. Yeah. So this /fc or -fc, that will give you full paths on if you're using the Windows compiler. If you're using GCC or Clang, the only way to get full paths is to convert your file names that you pass to it. Instead of passing relative paths, you have to pass the full path. So an example of that is right here. You can see before I pass my build file to the thing I'm trying to build to G++ here, I prefix the code home thing, which is the home of the folder. Yeah, so if you just compile with full paths, that'll probably fix your problem. And now let me fix that semicolon. Okay. So I hope that helps you, STC. Let me know. Happy to answer more questions if you have more. But now I want to do the next thing. So I'm generating all this command metadata. Now I want to stop and ask myself, do I care about the alias metadata right now? The advantage of having it is that I can put them in the runtime lists. and they might show up in the binding lists that I parse. So yes, I think I do care about it. Now the question is, how do I want to represent that data? And the reason that's an interesting question is I don't want to I could just plow through and put out all the string pairs that I have, the alias and its target name and so on, but the problem with doing that is that I don't end up with a structure that lets me easily say, here's a name, give me all the commands it might be, which is one of the things I want. And I'm also thinking, what if someone takes like one of the alias command names and they pass that to one of those macros? Right, we've got these macros here. If they pass the alias in, it would give them fcoder meta command ID, the alias name, and it would try to look that up from here. So, right, so that's not too big of a problem. What I have to do is just make a table that... But what if it's the wrong... What if it's the wrong... so the problem could be, if I generate the code that does this, I don't know the aliases yet. I don't have... Oh, but if they're all macros, that wouldn't matter. So I turn those into macros. The other thing I could do... Alright, so we have... Ooh, but then how do I know which one it is? If I have to generate it at runtime, or if I've generated it at compile time, I have two aliases, both the same name. I can't define it twice, so I have to define it once. If I define it once, I have to do that by... Okay, I get it. Okay, that can be done. So this can be fixed so that there are IDs for the aliases that are equal to the thing they are an alias to at runtime. And the way that will work is at compile time, by the time you're invoking those IDs, you've already defined them, which means that the compiler does have enough information to resolve that, without me having to add them as anything other than macros to something that will eventually get resolved in a weird way, but it'll work. The other question is, do I want to store any other data about the aliases at all? Because I could just plow through the list of alias names without any duplicates and actually not care what their targets potentially are at all. And that would at least allow you to get the metadata for an alias as it is aliased right now. But you wouldn't be able to retrieve potential values for that alias, which is a bit annoying. And this also wouldn't work if you were trying to use this outside of the custom layer, because then you would need those to be defined. You couldn't just say, yeah. Alright, so what I need is two different things. One thing I need is a... Okay. We have to do the hard one, and we have to do the easy one. We'll do the hard one first. The hard problem is this. We need a data structure that represents these. So let me pull up Scratch so that I can think to myself while you guys follow along for a minute. What I basically have is each of the data type. The data type we have is not a fixed width, right? I can't just do like struct alias name target, because once I do that, I want one alias with one name, so I would need like a target array, right? That's the trick. And so what I'm really looking at doing here is first we'll have like this int32t fcoder alias values, and it'll have like n, some number there, and then it'll have like, okay, I could be, you know, this ID, or I could be that ID, and then done. So that would be 2, and then I can have an int32 pointer fcoder alias table that's like this thing. Oh, but I would need, right, so then what we would do is a alias would look like this. It has an int32 targets. It has count, target count, whoops, don't do that, target count, and it has name and namelen, right? So that's what it would need. This might be too much work to make it worth it. I'm not sure what the easier thing to do would be. The easier thing to do would be to eliminate all of the aliased names for commands, which there's only a few, and that force everyone to update the names in their custom command configurations, their custom layers. That would save me the hour or two that this is going to take. Because not only do I have to generate that data, but the harder part is I have to sanitize all of the aliases and group them together appropriately into a different structure than we have now, because we just have a list of them. We need to regroup them into this feels like more work than it's worth. I just need, what's the easier solution? What's the easier solution? I could just avoid ever using an alias name in the bindings that I generate, so that I don't need to solve this for the generator, and then do the easy problem only. That's what I should do. Okay, so this is possible, but we're not doing this because that's more work than it's buying me. The easy problem we can solve. The easy problem is solved by doing this. So I have, let me grab a copy of these real quick so I can show you basically the solution to the easy problem, which is the easiest way to describe the easy problem too. So the thing is, we have this format here, and what I want to do is I want to provide a way to use the same, so that if you pass an alias into command ID or command metadata C, that if you're passing an alias in, that it resolves to the correct command for your build. So the way that would work is I would define 4coder meta command ID, and like, I don't know, next error is one of the alias things, right? So next error. And so now this will, when I get to this, if someone's passed next error in, it'll find this and use it. And now I just need to make sure that this is something that will resolve to the correct thing, right? And so how can I do that? What I can do is use a glue macro that'll go like this. 4coder meta command ID, and then next error. I already know that this has got to be next error here, right? Because I have it here. I'll just put it down again here. Next error will be a macro that will resolve to something else. Now, if you just did this, the problem is, you know, this the paste operator does the same thing that the stringify operator does, where it uses the unresolved version of a macro. So if you pass a macro into it, if for instance, next error might be defined, but it's not going to first collapse that. It will use that unmodified. But just like with the string operator, you can pass it through one layer to another macro, have that macro do the glue, and technically it's like this. You have a glue macro that does like AB, and it does glue underscore AB, and then glue underscore AB actually glues them together. And the reason that this is different is that when you do it right here, or if you do it right here, with the paste operator, it won't turn this string next error into the resolved version of the string. But here, when it goes, alright, now we've figured out that glue AB is glue underscore, or that glue 4coder metadata ID, meta command ID, next error is glue underscore, all that stuff. Then it resolves all the macros in that expression all at once, including the next error, which will get resolved to the correct thing. Which will be whatever way it was defined. And again, this won't be used. It would be an error to use this ID in the portion of your code that hasn't defined it yet. That's all there is to it. I don't think I could do any better than that. Even though other code wouldn't have that limitation, your alias code would not work if you hadn't yet defined your alias. Yeah. I don't see any way to do any better than that. The other thing I could do is just say aliases don't get to be used on this way at all, and then we're actually done. I'll just ignore aliases for now. We'll make it someday if it's a requested feature. I feel like that's what I'll do, because there's actually a better solution that would solve this by giving you a full data structure to deal with. So we're not even going to do the easy problem. Aliases just won't show up in the list of things for now. And maybe I'll just get to eliminate that, actually, by pushing everyone towards the resolved names and getting rid of the sort of hacks that I did to preserve backwards compatibility when I added sticky jumps. So we're going to move on. I'm going to say I've done the code gen. The next thing is, the next most important thing we need is I want to parse. How much time have I got? It's 12. I'll keep going till about 4:30, so that gives us a lot of time still. I want to parse the binding code as best I can so that I have a data structure that, let me recreate the to-do list now. So we have everything we've done so far. Then we want to do parse binding code, auto generate website binding page from binding code parse plus metadata header. And then bonus, we might have time after that. Runtime command search execute help lookup source. Okay, cool. We have a to-do list again. Parse the binding code. So this is a completely different problem. Basically what has to happen is in order to generate the website, I first have to build and run this generator to make sure that it's up to date. And then I have to run a second parser that won't go out to super users because it's completely irrelevant to them, which is the one that parses the binding code. So here we go. Let me make sure everything is saved. How do I want to start this one? I think I want to just go straight to the site generator that already works and build it into that. Okay. Not actually that much code in this file, which means I'm using another file to do the heavy lifting. And if I remember correctly, that's like the abstract document. That's the one. Yep. That's the one. Okay. Well, this comment is totally wrong. Document generator for 4coder site for 4coder documentation. So the situation is this: I have bindinglist.txt that I read from here, and I'm not going to actually skip that part of the process. I'm going to keep sending to bindinglist.txt because I don't feel like figuring out, like redoing the format. I want everything to flow through the same HTML generator, which means I need to put it into the source that the HTML generator will understand, which means I'm going to generate something that looks something like this. And that will run before I run generate site. So it's going to go like this. Generate a binding list. Now I can't remember what any of these args represent because I'm a huge jerk who didn't like put names on them here. Let me go look that up real quick. Now the biggest problem that we have here, I'm actually unconvinced that this is a good idea so far. maybe I should do the generator in maybe I should do this generator in metadata generator 2 and output it in the command metadata header after all. And the reason I'm saying that is because this already has all of the work of the problem with that is I really want to use the metadata, and having it in a header would be so useful. And so I want to do generate code, which is this code, and then compile another thing with that code that generates the binding stuff. But okay, there's another way I can do this. No. All I need is the data structure for now, not the full-on like embedded documentation strings. I can extract documentation strings later. I just need the data structure that gives me. Let's do this. Let me define the data structure I need, and then we'll work out how to fill it out, because that feels like the right move right now to me. So where does this belong, first of all? So this gets all of my there. So that gets all of the command metadata. I also want to get like binding map binding data. And so what I basically want is a mapping to be a thing with this is just like a sketch, not necessarily the way this will work out. A name, submap count, and a submap will be a thing that looks like this. It has a name of its own. A description of its purpose, and then a series of binds. This will have modifier flags, key code, so key code, yeah, and then command name. Okay. So there's basically a sketch of what this is going to look like when I've filled it all out. The next process will be filling it out. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, so let me save all this. This time I'm actually going to shut the stream down for a 5-minute break, because last time I left it up and it turned into like a 5-hour, 5.5-hour, 6-hour like YouTube upload that is crazy. So I'm going to cut it and I'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes, probably 5. See you guys in a bit.